Great day any day of the week to sit in for Hugh. But when you sit in on Wednesday, you get to say hi to Matt Continetti, doing great work over there at American Enterprise and on the Commentary Mag. Matthew, welcome, sir. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Mark. Thanks for having me.
It is very nice to have you. I want to talk about your upcoming or already released piece in Commentary about the new Republican majority. It's a very 30,000-foot look at sort of how Trump did it. I want to get to that in a second. But first, hot, fresh headlines. What's your thought on all these incoming nominees, how you think they're going to go collectively, individually? How's Trump 2.0 working out for you a couple of weeks in?
Well, I think Trump 2.0 is a very exciting time in American politics. You know, the first thing that strikes me when I look at these picks for cabinet posts and White House posts is the speed at which Trump is making these decisions, some of the fastest transition appointments in the history of the presidency. And the second thing I'm looking at is the difference between two groups of Trump nominees. For many of the Trump picks, they are people who are kind of fitted into these posts pretty conventionally. You know, think Marco Rubio at the State Department, Elise Stefanik at the UN, even someone like former Congressman Sean Duffy at Transportation. You know, he's someone who has a long experience in politics. He's also a media figure. Then there's the unconventional picks. And what I think is interesting about them, folks like Matt Gaetz at DOJ or RFK Jr. at HHS, even Tulsi Gabbard at DNI, is that they all kind of share a skepticism toward the institution that Trump is appointing them to lead. And what that says to me is that Trump wants to do it his way this time. He had some trouble with some of the agencies in his first administration, in particular the security agencies, DOJ, FBI, DOD. And this time he wants to put in people that he trusts, people who have also had adverse experiences with those agencies, and he wants to exert his control over them. So if they make it through confirmation, I think it'll be a very different Trump administration the second time around, one where the president is much more in charge of his cabinet.
Yeah, because Trump has always been kind of a take charge kind of guy, wanting things his way. That's central to his DNA. And yet in Trump 1.0, it just didn't seem to work out that way because I don't think he knew exactly how the field was striped. Everybody glibly says government ought to run like a business. Government is not a business. It's a million miles from being a business, and it's very, very different. And I think he knows the ways in which it is different. You mentioned, I think, exactly the unconventional nominees. I think everybody kind of knows what folks' problems are with Matt Gaetz. You can accept or dismiss them. I think they kind of know what the pushback is against RFK Jr. You know, we can talk about that. But Tulsi Gabbard is one that intrigues me. First of all, her conversion has been fascinating. There was a stretch there where she was on Fox News at least as much as Hannity. I mean, the woman is clearly a Republican now. What do you think is the source of some people? I've two types I've heard of. People have looked back at things she was voting for when she was a member of Congress and stuff she was saying 10 years ago. She's clearly changed. Also, there's that pesky meeting with Assad in Syria. That seems to be a stain for some. What's fair, what's unfair in all of that?
Well, Gabbard is a very interesting political figure. I mean, the first thing to say about her is that she is a critic of American foreign policy, and she's someone who has been critical of the foreign policies of bipartisan presidential administrations from the standpoint of non-intervention, foreign policy restraint. Someone who believes that American foreign policy has been aggressive and has often taken the side of figures like Assad or even Vladimir Putin to bring their perspective into the debate. At the same time, she's someone who's has experience in national security. I mean, serving in the National Guard and as a veteran. And she also is a critic of certain trends within the military and the culture in political correctness, for example, the rise of wokeism. What I think Trump is looking for with Tulsi Gabbard is someone who's going to provide a dissident view, a kind of alternative view to the foreign policy mainstream. And having that person as the director of national intelligence, I think, is also interesting because that job, it's not really a managerial job. It's more of a job of kind of organization, collating the different reports of all of the different intelligence agencies, and then presenting the consensus to the president. I think what Trump is looking for with Gabbard is someone who's not going to take the consensus at face value, someone who's going to push back. And that's, I think, helpful when Trump is making decisions because he's going to look for that unconventional viewpoint anyway. This way, Tulsi Gabbard will be a close and trusted advisor, but she's also going to have to face, I think, the counter arguments from very established and highly credentialed foreign policy types like Marco Rubio, like Mike Waltz at NSC, like Elise Stefanik, and like Pete Hegseth at DOD, who, he's an unconventional choice on his own, but he's someone whose foreign policy is much more in line, I think, with traditional Republican foreign policy than, say, Tulsi Gabbard is.
Do you believe that whether it's Tulsi Gabbard and some national security view that she may hold, or RFK Jr. being pretty radically pro-abortion, or something else, the thing that I keep coming back to is every single one of these people now knows they're not some rogue free spirit. They are in a Trump administration, and every single view of theirs is going to be funneled through the world of Trump. And I just don't think I see a lot of conflict coming to you.
Well, I think you're onto something there, Mark. I mean, I do believe that RFK Jr.'s views on abortion will come up in a Senate confirmation. I mean, remember, the Senate is controlled by Republicans, and even though Donald Trump has really changed the Republican Party's view on abortion, saying that it's a policy that should really be left to the states, there are many Republican senators who are passionately pro-life, and so I think they will ask RFK Jr. about it. And I believe that RFK Jr.'s answer will be very similar to what you just said, Mark, which is that, look, I've worked for President Trump. And I've always thought that people sometimes can go a little lean ahead of their skis in thinking that they are the policymakers or that they are somehow more important than President Trump is. And when that happens, it usually doesn't end well for the person who has kind of the big head. So I do think with this picks, these are people that Trump knows. They're people that Trump likes. They're all good communicators. They're all good on television. And they all share to varying degrees Trump's worldview. And so I think you'll have less freelancing in the second Trump administration, more of a sense that everyone is working to advance Donald Trump's agenda, not their own private agendas.
The latest commentary mag piece from Matthew Continetti in the December 24 edition is called The New Republican Majority. You identify what happened, what didn't happen, why it happened. What do you think are the takeaways, the lessons of this remarkable campaign cycle? What's the big lesson of all of this?
Absolutely. Well, I think the first big lesson is that Americans are extremely dissatisfied with the state of their nation. That when you look at the surveys that were conducted on election night, the surveys surrounding the election, you see that Americans are very dissatisfied with the direction that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris put the country on. And a corollary of that is that Americans desire change. For people who wanted change, and that was a majority of the electorate, they overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump. And so with all of these controversial picks, I often say to people, look, Americans know what they're getting. Trump was president before. People understand his views on things. They were watching the rallies even while much of the mainstream media was caught up with the vibes and the joy of Kamala Harris's losing campaign. So they are voting for change. I think that's the first takeaway. And the second one, Mark, is they want this economy to return to the way it was under Trump right before the pandemic hit in 2020. They want stable prices. They want growing incomes, especially among working class Americans and minority Americans. And they want jobs, right? They want a sense that the American president is fighting for American jobs and not necessarily more interested in upholding this global economic and military structure that America has led now for some 80 years. So I think the economy is important. I also believe that this was a vote to close the southern border. When you look at the priorities of Americans, immigration ranked very highly. I think there's no question that what Joe Biden did to the southern border had catastrophic consequences, not only for his presidency, but for many communities throughout this nation. And so when I look at Donald Trump's priorities in the coming years, he has an opportunity now to fix the two big problems. One is the economy, and two is the border. If he does that, he'll be on track to have a very successful second term, or as I like to call it, his second first term.
Exactly right. About 60 seconds for this, and we could do an entire segment on it. Let's talk around the world. He made a big point of saying, look, I'm not going to have Nikki Haley. I'm not going to have Mike Pompeo, who's awesome, but Mike Pompeo is a big believer in a lot more money for Ukraine. Tulsi Gabbard decidedly is not. Is this foreign policy team a big message to Zelensky that the trough of money is about to come to an end?
I do believe so. When you look at these foreign policy picks, including Waltz, including Stefanik, including Rubio, they all were very much skeptical or opposed to additional money for Ukraine this year. And so what that means is Trump wants to enter this end game in Ukraine with a free hand, with the maximum amount of maneuverability in order to say to both parties, not just Ukraine, but also Russia, that if we want this awful war to end, he will be willing to take steps to either disadvantage or advantage either party so we can restore something like the balance of power. So this is I think we're entering the end game of the Ukraine war. I don't know
Very
how
good.
it's going to turn out. It's very dangerous.
No,
but Trump
nor
has
do I.
open hand. Yeah. Right.
Matt, thank you. I love hearing you on Wednesday. I love hosting on Wednesday so that we can talk. Matt Continetti at Commentary.